It's absolutely an honor today to have Manjula Tekal with us. In fact, she says that she loves to make sense of stories separated by place, time, and context. In fact, she holds a master's in management. She's a MBA from IIM Bangalore and also a double master's from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. She's the author of Devyani. That's a novel which is based on a story from Mahabharata. And she's in the process of also writing other books. She's part of a much acclaimed anthology, Arya. She's written, she'll talk about it too during the course of the interview. And of course, she's translated a fantastic book by Veer Savarkar, which is Moplah. And we are going to talk about it definitely today. It is being published by Garuda Prakashan, and thanks to Garuda for putting us together with Manjula and having this session today. Welcome, Manjula ji, on our session.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And again, thanks to Garuda for connecting us. And it's been a privilege to meet you.
You know, I would like to start talking about your books and translations. In fact, I feel that you've had a wonderful writing journey. So I'm sure you would like to share it with our viewers.
Thank you. Perhaps we can start with Moplah itself. Basically, I started off with translations. And I did one translation of a novel, biographical novel about Chandrasekhar Azad by Babu Krishnamurthy. That's called Ajaya in Kannada. And it's called Azad the Invincible in English. So that was my first book in some sense. You know, there was another book which I had written, a couple of books which I had written previously, but I had not exactly gotten into the publishing journey, so to speak. So anyway, so this was the first book which I gave out for publication. So anyway, so that was a fabulous book. It is a biography of Chandrasekhar Azad, like I said. And it brings out, with Azad as the foreground, as the focal point, it brings out the life of a revolutionary of those times, his friends, what he did, his ideals, what prompted him to be what he did, and then what he achieved and what he failed at, and so on. And it's a very, very heartwarming, in a lot of ways, heart-wrenching kind of a novel. I really enjoyed writing it, and at times I have even cried over it. And so, ditto about the translations, Moplah and Gomantak. They're the two novels that Savarkar wrote. And while writing Moplah, it's again, as you know, it's a gut-wrenching story. And when you read it, it's like, oh my God, why am I even reading this kind of a thing? But it's important that you actually know these things. And it is very important for us not to be divorced from our own history. So it was a labor of love and some kind of a, I just have to do this kind of a thing. And Savarkar has done such a beautiful job. You just can't not do this. You know what I mean? I mean, you have to read it, you have to write it, you have to be able to say to our youngsters saying, this is some book that you have to read and appreciate. And that is about the, as you know, the Khilafat movement and the Moplah riots of 1920s. And Gomantak is a third translation. It is a novel by Savarkar again. And it is about the Goa Inquisitions. Okay. And it's another totally gut-wrenching story. But Savarkar has got one enormous, he has a way of looking at life in such a positive way. Can you imagine, after having gone through the kind of life that he did, the travels that he did, he still remained positive. So after finishing both Moplah and Gomantak, you just look and say, oh my God, how did he even have this kind of an optimism? So both of them end, even though they're terribly tragic and heart-wrenching, they end on a high note. And ditto Gomantak, it ends on a very high note, and that is inspiring in itself. So yeah, that is my introduction to the 3 translations that I have done. And yeah. And I also written novels.
this part of you, it's not only about translations, it's about reading so many books, some unheard stories about Mahabharata, some stories which are not known and you're trying to unravel. That's fantastic. But how was your experience of translating the book on Azad? Azad being one of the greatest revolutionaries of Indian freedom struggle. And here you have Veer Savarkar's book, who's obviously, as we all know, is the most misunderstood of freedom fighters that we have today. Though a lot of people are writing on him, you are here translating his work.
Yes.
So how was that transition from Azad to Savarkar?
Actually, Savarkar has been, I would say, an equally long journey. When I was, I read both Azad, I read Ajaya in Kannada when I was a little girl. I think I must have been all of 10 years old when I first read that book. The original translation, I was actually there at the release ceremony. Okay. And I remember thinking it was a glitzy thing. Lots of people were there. All the real true blue revolutionaries were actually present. And then I was taken around, not to meet them. I met them, I suppose. My father was like, showing me off, this is my daughter and all that stuff. And I didn't quite talk to them or anything, but it was kind of like, it was a ceremony. It was actually very nice. So I wrote a little précis, a little, a report, school report of sorts about the book. And then I showed it to the author. And then he was like very pleased, with me. He's a family friend actually those days. So he was very pleased with me. Then around the same time, I read a biography of Savarkar. That was, it is called Atmahuti in Kannada. And that is written by another biographer called Shivaram. He's also, all these people are fantastic authors. And then, I don't know, I mean, the reading public at large has not been as kind to them as they should be. So anyway, it is another, so I remember thinking it was such a beautiful life, and some of the poems are translated by Shivaram. And then I used to actually read the translated poems of Savarkar in Kannada. And I was like very, very touched. So anyway, so like I said, it's been a long journey. And I also read Gomantak of Savarkar in Kannada by the same author, Shivaram. So when I decided I was going to translate Savarkar's work into English, I tried to look for the Kannada, book, and then it was not available. It was out of print. So I was just generally like, rifling around on archive.org, and I noticed it was there in Hindi. So I decided I was going to pick that up and then translate that into English. So that's how Gomantak came about. And he has written only 2 novels, I think, Savarkar, unless I'm very much mistaken. So that is how, like, I also looked for Moplah at the same time. And then I found that also, and then I translated that into English. Both of them are from Hindi to English. Yeah. The power of the novels, they're such powerful novels now. You can't help but do what I have done. Especially if you want to do this, there is no way you're going to let it, let it lie.
So right. So right.
Yeah.
And, I remember you have written a very powerful author's note, rather translator's note in this book, right, where you say that no one should read the book if they are unprepared to have all their preconceived notions blown to bits and destroyed.
Yes.
And you also say that translating this book was not easy for you.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't. So perhaps you would like to talk about it, because I was going through the book and I could see undercurrents. I could see with how much of emotion this is written, how much it was important for the truth to come out. Yes. And you being a translator, you are suddenly going through that journey in which you are reliving entirely. Yes. If it was 1921 that we are talking about and the subsequent years. So how was it for you translating the book, and how was it for you to come out of the whole scenario after you finished writing?
Yeah, it's a very deep question. I'll try to answer it as best as I can. And yes, nobody should read this book unless they are actually prepared to face the truth. And it's not an easy truth to face. And if you just think about it as the fact that it has taken about 100 years for it to actually come out, that should tell you a lot. I mean, now suddenly after 100 years, that movies are being made, books are being written about the Moplah massacre. And just to think for a minute that Savarkar had written this novel right then, like, in the 1920s, immediately after the massacre actually happened. And it was completely like, completely and deliberately ignored. So that tells you about the power of the novel. If it had come out at that time, probably a lot better correctional efforts could have been made, and they were not made at that point at the right psychological hour. And that is a huge mistake that we have made. I mean, there is no amount of whitewashing that will solve a problem. You have to actually face the problem and see it as it is. And then only then can you take any correctional actions, so to speak, corrective action. So anyway, to talk about the book itself, it opens up, when you actually open the book, it opens with this very beautiful atmosphere of old time Kerala. Okay, where there's a school, a lot of Vedist schools are, they're alive and they're functioning, and there's a temple, and then there's a little girl who's being schooled in, the scriptures and all that stuff. She sings and all that, and she is the heroine, protagonist, not exactly the protagonist of the movie. She's actually the hero of the movie. And I mean, I'm sorry, the novel. And it is through her, the novel looks at her and whatever happened to her. And that is supposed to symbolize what happened to the Hindu community of Kerala, Malabar at that time. And juxtapose the idyllic scene at the beginning and the last scene where, there's a well, yes, thousands of bodies have been thrown there. And then there is one young man who's trying to get out. And when they talk about that thing, I mean, I feel like right even now, when I remember, he actually steps on somebody's head and catches hold of somebody's, body, and somebody is half dead. And when he does that, somebody groans, and then he is like apologetic about the fact that, oh my God, am I going to have to do this just to be alive? He's almost at the point of saying, even I don't want to be alive. Then somehow there is that impulse to life, and he gets out. So that is the first scene, and that is almost the last scene. That's the thing. But fortunately for a reader like me, I mean, when I was actually writing that scene, I don't know, it was horrible. You don't even want to edit that thing. You just want to get that thing done and then just move on. You don't even want to reread it. It's the impact of that thing is so profound and wounding. But then again, at the very end, what is so heartening is that a lot of them have already been reclaimed. The people who've been forcibly converted have been given a chance to come back to the Hindu fold. And there's a Swami. Presumably, he stands in for Shraddhananda. So he goes about, and then he is trying to reconvert everybody back into the Hindu fold. And all those things, all those efforts are happening. And there is this one girl who's been converted to she's abducted by a Moplah and then converted. And then the protagonist, the Damodar, the hero of the movie, recognizes her and says, "Oh, Malti, oh, you're the one." And then the Swami says, "Okay, you two guys have to now carry the baton and then, make Hindu society glorious," kind of thing. That is the most beautiful thing I have read, and also the most heart-wrenching.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Yeah.
You've said it quite correctly. This book really moves you, and definitely your job as a translator, though you wanted to do it and you did it, must have been so difficult. As a reader, when I read the story, I was totally moved. I knew the story per se. I mean, when you read the book, you come to know everything. And I encourage everyone to go through this book, the story, the content, and of course, the beautiful translation by Manjula ji. The process of translating and everything, yeah, but finally getting it to the right publishing house,
Yes.
getting it published must have been a strenuous. You needed somebody who can really understand the content, the value of this translation. So, how did you get involved in the publishing of this book?
Thank you for that question. But before I actually answer that question, I want to make one little point. There is a historical note that I have added to the back of the book. And that puts the novel in context, I think, because after so much 100 years have passed, the novel itself has, many people know about what happened and stuff, but many people might not also know about the historical context, the Anglo-Mysore Wars, Hyder and Tipu's, ravaging Malabar and the Neelambur forest, what economics played into the whole thing, and how the Hindu people were dispossessed and put back. And then actually, when we think about, there were so many little principalities in that region, and each of them fought with Tipu Sultan, but the Nayars were defeated. And after that, when the Brits took over, after they won they defeated Tipu, they took over. They actually had to the social organism had changed completely by then. So even though the old people, landlords, were put back, the hate and basically the hate was so sharp that they continued to fight. And even like Malabar Bar Manual by Logan talks about, there were so many people. I mean, they were doing such the rapacity of the people. The Moplah was harsh enough that the landlords could not have done anything. How much ever they appeased, they were not able to control them. That is a short of the long. And the British machinery, the administrative machinery, was not strong enough to contain that constant fight and stuff. So all these things are there. We must take that into perspective before we venture into that. And added to this horrible mix, there was the appeasement politics by Gandhi and the Congress movement and all that stuff, and that added to the toxic mixture, so to speak. So all I'm trying to say is, there's a historical note. So I hope that it is going to help you a lot.
Yes.
In actually contextualizing the novel and add to your understanding of the novel, if you will.
Yes.
As to the publishing and all that stuff, I just got lucky, Pramod Kumar Buravali, he saw me on Twitter, and then he said, at that point in time, I was trying to write my first novel, Devyani, and then he just talked to me. I don't know what prompted him. I am not even particularly active on Twitter. I only talk about, very basic things. I retweet and then I reply to people, that kind of stuff. I don't do much on Twitter, which I should, by the way. But
yeah, you should. There's so much knowledge you have. You need to share and let people know.
Thank you. But it needs a lot of work to be able to actually to be disciplined and attack Twitter the way it should be attacked, so to speak. So anyway, so Pramod saw me on Twitter, and then he spoke to me, and then he introduced me to Sankrant Sano. And that's how Devyani got published and it kind of came into being. So I have been fortunate in some sense that I did not seek out the publishers at all. So it just happened, it organically happened. And Gomantak and Moplah are two novels which are, I think it fits in with the mission statement of Garuda. And they were like very pleased to actually, say, okay, go ahead and then do it. Yes. It took a while, but it came into being through them.
Yeah, fantastic. What was the most surprising element of Savarkar's personality that you discovered during the translation? Something that you felt you knew about him, but yes, while you were translating his work, there's more to him that you discovered. And you felt that this is something I didn't know about. Or this was how it was. I mean, you felt that, yes, this is how you had picturized him, and this is how he's written the book. It's like he's very positive in the end, and that is his personality always. So
yes. Yeah, the Gomantak is one novel that reads like perhaps Divan. The underdog, the person, the young boy who's been done down, he's been converted, he's a slave. Okay, suddenly he comes out and then he becomes this hero of a Maratha hero, and then reconquers everything. And he's gone through an entire lifetime in just 1 second.
Sure.
Yeah, there.
Yes.
So within that 30 years, he's lived a lifetime. And then he comes back as a hero, a war hero and everything. That's kind of like, that's the kind of stuff movies are actually made of. And that again surprises me that it was not discovered in the way it ought to have been discovered. What is so great about Diwar that how is Diwar anything better than Gomantak, I ask you? It's, that is it. That's the short of the long. But what have I discovered? I don't know whether there's been the epiphany kind of a moment. I have always been in love with Savarkar's poetry. This is despite the fact that I don't know Marathi. I mean, whatever I can understand from Sanskrit is all I understand of Savarkar's poetry. But I have been privileged to read Shivram's, translations. I have always been in love with Savarkar's poetry. So even in these novels, right? If you look at like Moplah, for example, he makes this old Moplah lady a stand-in for Bharat Mata, if you will. So one of her sons becomes a convert, and one of her sons becomes, her grandson. One grandson becomes whatever, and then the second grandson becomes a hero. So that is the way the metaphor for Bharat Mata. So only a poet can think of something like this, and so you can see Savarkar's poetic heart, in Moplah. And go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
As I said earlier, that he's been the most misunderstood freedom fighter. And I'm sure you're really lucky that you've kind of seen him very closely through his writings. So do you think you understand him better now, or you've always understood him the way you did?
That is one question I'll never be able to answer, because, every kind of reading or every little thing kind of adds layers to your understanding, adds layers to your discovery. So at some point in time, you probably have only a partial understanding at any given point in time. The more you read, the more you discover, and that kind of thing. So I think I understand Savarkar a lot better than before I started translating his works. To that extent, I can say, yes, I do understand him better. But do I understand him completely? Not sure. I wish, I can answer in the affirmative, but I don't know.
And coming back to this book, why do you think, as a translator, people should read this book? I mean, it is just for the viewers, people who should, I mean, I know we have talked about it. It's already a very, very interesting read. But why do you think they should read? What should be the main thing that they should really know about? Why is it so important for us? Because there's so much of history that we don't know about. The historical narrative, the history keeps on changing every 8 years. It's under remaking. But why should a book like Moplah be read in today's context?
See, you keep saying that Savarkar is a misunderstood man. I put it to you that he's a deliberately misunderstood man. You know, there were political forces at play that kind of obscured, like, you know, they deliberately made sure that he would not rise. He was extremely popular at the time that, you know, he was imprisoned after Gandhi's murder. And apparently there is this story that I read somewhere that he broke down in court and then he said, an ungrateful country and all that stuff. When I read that, I was myself in tears, actually. So anyway, that is a totally different thing. But my thing is that he is a deliberately misunderstood man. And after we got independence, you would have thought, okay, fine, now is the time that his ideas, while they might not be completely embraced and completely, implemented or whatever, they would at least be given their due place in history and their due place in independent India, which it did not happen. So why should we read it? Because there's a lot of correction that needs to take place. Why should he be a, misunderstood man? I mean, isn't it time that we really truly understood him the way we should have understood him about, like, maybe 70 years ago, 75 years ago, whatever? I mean, it is not fair to us, that great man is gone. He said what he had to say. Perhaps he didn't have a chance to say whatever he wanted to say. Who knows? The point is, though, we have his writings and we owe it to ourselves to truly understand him. A lot of ideas that have come in this thing, like, for example, purification, those things have not even found their due place. I mean, it's not that, see, conversions are not happening. Reconversions are not happening. Conversions are happening in huge numbers. So why is there such a disparity? Why should it happen that way? So why is the majority not being heard the way it ought to be heard? They have to have their own place in our own country. We should have our own place. And so many other ideas, like eradication of caste differences. Like, for example, everybody is reviling caste as an idea these days. Nobody actually, I don't even know. Caste is a Portuguese word. It should not even have a place in our lexicon. We think in terms of jati and varna and all those things. So we should have our own lexicon. We should have our own words to interpret these ideas. That is the first thing. And the second thing is, every jati, every varna still has their place. It is there in society. They have their own place. And it is not as if those are in conflict with each other. The conflict, weaponization of those things should not happen. You should not have a fight between them. They should be supplementary and complementary rather than in conflict with each other. All these things won't happen unless you actually read and understand what the ideas are all about. So that is my, yeah. And he actually showed up the political class and their corruptness in its true colors. And that is another thing we have missed. All these things. There's so many ideas out there that we haven't even examined. So why should we read Savarkar? We should actually re-examine these, ideas, and then apply them to the current situation as needed. I'm not even saying wholeheartedly embrace everything that he said. No, but every idea of his deserves examination and re-examination. and incorporation, actually, as it applies to the current milieu situation and so on. So yeah, that is why people should read Savarkar.
Absolutely well said, because he was much ahead of his time. And when you read about
Yeah,
him,
he was way ahead of his times.
absolutely.
Sorry.
And that is why we should read his biographies. We should read the books that he's actually written. And people like you have taken it on themselves to be able to reach it to the wider audience through your translations. That's a very, very important connect between the book, because I know it's in the regional language originally, but you translating it, I'm hoping and I hope and I'm sure it is already reaching the wide audience that it deserves through you. I'm running out of time a little bit. Otherwise, I would have definitely discussed about your book, Devyani. And I really look forward to reading that and maybe having a separate session on that, because I have been interviewing a lot of authors connected with the different characters. And Devyani is one character that everyone should know about, and also about Damayanti in Arya. So anything else in less than a minute you want to tell us? Because we are running a little out of time right now.
Thank you so much for taking the time to interview me, talk to me, have a conversation with me. And thanks to Garuda, thanks to you. And thanks most of all for having, I have this chance to remember Savarkar and these books all over again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manjula, for gracing our platform. It's been such a wonderful conversation. We were transported back to the era of Savarkar, his thoughts, his writings, through your good work. And we hope to hear from you more and more. Please keep writing. Please keep translating. We need more people like you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And please do not forget to subscribe our channels.